The Secretary will read the order of the day.
Reply by the President to debate on State of the Nation address.
Honorable members, in the interest of safety for all present in the chamber, we request that you please keep your mask on and sit in your designated areas. Thank you. I now call upon the Honorable the President. Please.
Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Nosiviwe Mapisa Makula, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, But Amos Masondo, Deputy President of the Republic, David Tabede Mabuza, Honorable Ministers and Honorable Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members, representatives of local government as in Salga, and all those who are present. Let me start off by thanking you, Honorable Speaker and Honorable Chairperson of the Council of Provinces, for allowing me to participate in the debate on the virtual platform. It enabled me to listen very carefully and to take copious notes of some of the issues that were being raised here. So I want to thank you for that. Ndidobe ndilibuwe nabatu bote beba amba hapa noni kazote zezo ambiwa ndichivula parlamente ndialibuwa ngauri ndi batu banji beba amba ndilibuwa zote zwibi na zwibuya zezo ambiwa hapa noni. As I concluded the State of the Nation address last week, I called on every South African to rally together in our fight against corruption, in our fight to create jobs, and in our fight to achieve a more just and equal society. I call for a new consensus to unite our people and our country in a moment of great crisis behind an agenda for change and renewal. In the debate over the last 2 days, several members of the two houses of Parliament have answered this call. Although they represent different parties and different perspectives, many of the speakers in the debate affirmed their commitment to this shared goal. We've heard many valuable contributions on how we may more effectively address the many challenges that confront our country right now. But we also heard a lot of vitriol. We also had a lot of attacks. There is no need to respond to the insults that were lodged here. because in the end, the insults that were hurled here do not contribute to a meaningful debate about the challenges our country faces. Instead, I am motivated to reflect on the constructive criticisms and sincere suggestions that have been put forward with a view to improving the state of our nation. I refer here, for example, to the contribution on behalf of the Honorable Buthelezi on the characterization and appropriate response to state capture. I refer to the suggestions by the Honorable Whitfield on moving the South African Police Service into the 21st century by introducing modern, cutting-edge training for police officers and the more effective use of technology. I refer to the call by Honorable Malema on the industrialization of cannabis in a manner that benefits local farmers in places like the Eastern Cape, Limpopo, and KwaZulu-Natal. Put aside many other things that he said, including the fact that I was wearing a cheap suit. Netibutise kore aw, suit ya mina ingena kuikwalao. Angarandi kore vanhu van'wani va saseka na. Ani saseke swinene, a fanela kore a ri president a nyamotla u sasekile u fake suit ya kahle. Instead yena wa nrhuketela. So I will not comment on that. I refer here also to the comments of Premier Ntombela on rural infrastructure and development and the suggestion by the Honorable Lisie on solutions for youth unemployment. Another example of valuable suggestions were those made by the Honorable Nodada on the prioritization of reading, writing, language, and numeracy in the foundation phase, and on ways of assisting those learners that have dropped out of school. We appreciate the call by Deputy Chair of the NCOP, Honorable Lucas, for government to develop the necessary tools to accelerate the implementation of gender-responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, evaluation, and auditing framework. And we agree with the Honorable Heron that whilst other people want to move offshore because of the many challenges that we face, there is still room for opportunity for many South Africans here in this beautiful country. The Honorable Hlengwa makes an important point that since all development is local, municipalities should be empowered through increased budget allocations to meet the demands of development. Now, these are some of the contributions that have made this debate worthwhile, and I expect that ministers, in addition to the many issues that were raised by ministers who are responsible for government work on this platform, and I also expect that government officials will have taken note of the many issues, suggestions, and criticisms that were raised during this debate. So I thank you all for all the inputs that you have made. In the end, the criticisms, the inputs will in the end make us a lot better than what we are. And I don't know about the insults, what they will do, but it's okay. As I began the State of the Nation address last week, I said that the speech would focus on the measures we are taking and ought to take to enable faster economic growth and the creation of employment. That was the main heart of what I wanted to impart to you all and to the nation. This is because fixing the economy is our most pressing challenge at this moment, and is essential to progress in almost every other area of the lives of the people of our country. Our focus on the economy does not, however, diminish the importance of many other areas of government's work. It does not diminish the many other aspects of our people's lives. Many of these issues have been raised in the debate and will be dealt with in greater detail in upcoming budget votes and public engagement by ministers. As we reflect on the state of the nation and as we look to the year ahead, we should always remember that we have come from what our country, or what we have come from and what our country has endured. We cannot escape the basic truth that we have an economy and a society that is still largely defined and scarred by its colonial and apartheid past. Despite the great progress that has been made in the last 28 years to address the legacy of dispossession and exploitation, the material divides between black and white, men and women, rural and urban, still persists up till today. The steady economic recovery, expanding employment and increasing investment that followed the advent of our democracy was disrupted by the 2008 global financial crisis. It was also disrupted by falling commodity prices, by severe energy constraints, by inefficient network industries, and now lately by the impact, negative impact I may add, or destructive impact, I should say, of state capture and on so many vital public institutions. At the same time, our economy has become less and less competitive. We could not sustain investment in economic infrastructure, and that has persisted over a long time. As public spending rapidly increased, the benefits of increased spending declined to a point where the cost of servicing our debt has been crowding out our social spending. This was the situation that this administration was elected in 2019 to correct, and we took several decisive measures to turn the economy and the country around. Yet, just as we were emerging from more than a decade of low growth and deepening unemployment, and from the era of state capture and the assault on institutions of the state that accompanied it, we were hit by the worst global health crisis in more than a century. We cannot disregard the fact that the pandemic has caused our economy severe damage that will take years to repair. Unless we appreciate these facts, unless we characterize the current situation correctly, our response may well be ill-considered, and it may also be misdirected. It is wrong to say that there's been no action, as a number of people who spoke here said. We have achieved remarkable progress in spite of the constraints of the present and the challenges that have accumulated over a number of years. Confronted with the worst global health crisis in 100 years, we were able to rise up to the challenge and protect our people. In less than a year, we've undertaken the most extensive public health campaign in our country's history, constructing new hospital bed capacity in many locations, deploying dedicated health workers to care for the sick throughout the country, and administering more than 30 million COVID-19 vaccine doses to over 18 million South Africans. At the beginning of the pandemic, we increased social grant payments, and within the space of only a few weeks, established a brand new grant that initially reached 6 million South Africans and now reaches some 10 million South Africans. Now, I know of no other country on our continent that has been able to achieve or to do as much as we have done in dealing with the COVID-19 disaster. And we mobilized a national effort working with industry and public research institutions to build things such as ventilators and to produce hand sanitizers, medical grade face masks and gloves, therapeutic drugs and cutting-edge vaccines. And this we were able to do in response to the moment that faced our nation. We introduced an unprecedented social and economic relief package, which amounted to some 10% of our GDP, to provide vital support to businesses in distress, to workers facing retrenchment, and to households that were threatened with deepening hunger. When we are looked at more globally, as a middle-income country, we measure up well in the leagues of those high-income countries as well. We confronted the COVID-19 pandemic with great strength, with great commitment to save the people and the businesses of our country. Our collective actions in response to the pandemic saved tens of thousands of lives and kept millions of people out of dire poverty. While most of the members of these two houses of our parliament are firmly committed to building a united, equal, and prosperous nation, others have different interests and priorities. Where some preach despair, we see hope. We see that hope in the 10 million people who now receive the social relief of distress grant. We see it in the new work and livelihood opportunities created by the initiatives that we have taken, including the presidential employment stimulus that will soon reach over 1 million people. We see hope in the bridges that are being built so that children can go safely to school. We see it in the sector master plans that are driving new investment, which creates new jobs and the revival of key industries in our country. That is what progress looks like. It's not doom and doom and doom and no action. Where some create doubt, we see renewed confidence. We see it in the most significant reform of our energy system in nearly a century, creating conditions for cheaper, for cleaner, and more plentiful electricity. Where even as we transition from where we are, we will be able to ensure that it becomes a just transition that cares for the workers in our mines and the communities that live in the towns and the cities that produce electricity. We see this in the long-delayed reforms like the spectrum auction and the revised critical list that are being implemented by this government. We see it in the concrete steps that we are taking to modernize our ports, as well as rail infrastructure, and to get our passenger rail services back on track. And some of these may be taking time, but we are coming from a very broken situation, which we are sewing up and building up all the time and not sleeping on the job. That is what progress looks like. Where some are determined to sow division, we are working to unify our country in the fight against corruption. We have strengthened the ability of the National Prosecuting Authority to pursue those responsible for state capture and corruption, rebuilding its capacity and establishing a dedicated unit in the investigating directorate. We are already seeing the results of a strong independent prosecuting authority in several cases as well. Let me be clear yet again on the matter of prosecution, because somehow this notion is embedded in the minds of the members here. When they look at me, they often say, "When are you prosecuting all these people?" I do not prosecute. I'd like to make it very clear, and some even suggest that the president may be using the prosecutorial agencies against those that they perceive as what they call my opponents or enemies. It is not within the power of the president, and it shouldn't be within the power of the president to initiate criminal proceedings against anyone. And I have said this repeatedly, both here and elsewhere, that I am not the one who initiates criminal proceedings. That is the sole responsibility of the relevant director of public prosecutions. It is important that I state this so that this thought and notion that is embedded in our heads should begin to melt away. Our task as the executive is to capacitate the NPA and make sure that it has all the resources that it needs to prosecute wrongdoing as an independent authority. That's all. As government, we have supported State Capture, the Commission, to complete its work and enable the Commission to share vast amounts of information with the investigators and prosecutors. And we signed regulations to that effect. We are taking disciplinary action against government officials implicated in procurement irregularities and have started to recover billions in looted funds. Now, this hasn't often been done in the past, but it is happening now. We have put in place capable leadership at previously captured state-owned entities and public institutions, and have reversed, you may care to listen first, and have reversed the decay in SARS, at the PIC, in ESCOM, Transnet, and many others. You may not agree, but that's precisely what we've been doing. That, to me, is what progress looks like. For those who care to look, we are on a long and difficult journey to renew the promise of our democracy. At times, it may seem that the path is too long. And it may also seem like it is not achieving much. And it may also seem like the climb is too steep and that the risks are far too great. But it is at precisely that moment that the courage of resilience is required. Even though we disagree in this House, across society there is broad agreement that as we grow the economy, create employment and fight poverty and hunger, no person should be left behind. We have a responsibility first and foremost to those South Africans who are poor, who are marginalized, and who are vulnerable. This informs all our policy choices and all the programs that we seek to pursue and are pursuing. This is the hallmark of our developmental stake. Leaving no one behind means focusing on small, medium, and micro enterprises, small-scale farmers, and on the informal economy. A number of other countries have a huge and burgeoning informal economy that sustains and supports the lives of ordinary people. That is not so with us. And this is the direction that we do need to take. It is in these areas, small-scale enterprises, that most jobs will be created and through which poor South Africans will be able to earn a livelihood. We are removing constraints in the establishment and growth of these businesses and providing them with also access to finance and skills and various capabilities. This explains the work being done by the Department of Small Business Development to lower barriers to entry and to remove impediments to growth through, amongst other things, a review of key legislation like the Business Act. It explains the redesign of the bounce back loans scheme so that small businesses can more easily access the funds that they need. And it is our focus on small business that informs the expansion of the employment tax incentive to make it easier for small companies to hire more people. As you recall, this initiative was launched to make it easier for firms and companies to hire young people. It has done extremely well, and it is to this effect that the Minister of Finance will speak about it when he presents his budget. The work that is underway to reduce red tape will have benefits for companies of all sizes, unleashing investment and growth. And the establishment of a team in the presidency to tackle red tape, which will be headed by Siponkos, is similar to initiatives taken by governments around the world. It is located in the presidency because red tape is not found only in the department and in one department rather. And there is no single department that can tackle red tape on its own. Not only does red tape increase the cost of doing business, but it also constrains South Africans in their everyday lives and in many of their interactions with government. Whether it is a matter of getting a building permit, I waited for 3 years and more to get a building permit to extend a room by 4 meters. And that in itself was a constraint. A title deed, when people wait for title deeds, we need to find out exactly what it is that makes the system come up with the impediments. People wait for years for things such as water licenses. They wait for years because of the bureaucratic inefficiency that has become embedded in our system. And I'm pleased to have heard that either the Western Cape or Cape Town also has a red tape unit. Now we will be able to compare notes to see how best that works. We are going to compare notes. We are already comparing notes with what happens in other countries. Countries that have been able to reduce red tape, regulatory impediments, countries that are now rolling out the red carpet instead of red tape to those who would want to move on with a number of initiatives, whether business related or just personal initiatives that they embark on. While all businesses will benefit from these reforms, it is small and informal businesses that will benefit most, whether for a stable electricity supply or cheaper data, similar regulations or more efficient state, they will benefit. But in the end, it is going to be our people who will benefit the most, because through this unit we will be able to focus on areas that our people find as huge constraints that form roadblocks to the progress of their own lives. Our commitment to the transformation of the economy so it benefits all South Africans is unwavering. We will not abandon our commitment to the protection of workers, to supporting and growing black business, and to affirming black people and women in the workplace. We will not abandon our support for the poor and working class, nor our commitment to build a more just and equal society. As this government, we're quite clear about where our policies come from. Our policies did not form over a few months or a few years, but are defined by a constant progressive thread that spans over decades. The program of action that are outlined in the State of the Nation is founded on seminal documents like the Freedom Charter, the Ready to Govern document, the Reconstruction, the RDP program, as well as the National Development Plan. As this government, we are quite clear on what our mandate is. We have a manifesto for which the people of this country demonstrated overwhelming support. That is a bold and coherent plan to achieve a better life for all. Now, my call for a new consensus for change and renewal is informed by the challenges of the present and is also guided by the strength of the electoral mandate we got in 2019. The focus on job creation, which are outlined in SONA, has given rise to a useful debate across society on the relative roles of the state and the private sector in fostering economic growth and creating employment. And I've rather enjoyed listening to different voices talking about this concept. And in many ways, it was about time that as South Africans, we engage in this debate. Some speakers have taken a crude and self-serving approach to a complex issue. But for the most part, commentators have engaged meaningfully with one of the most important questions facing our country today. They have earnestly sought to answer the central question of who will create the jobs for the 11 million unemployed people in our country. The state has a clear role to play in job creation. Through state-owned, through state-owned enterprises, the state employs a lot of people. Through public employment programs, which I spoke about, the state employs people. Through the impact of its industrial policy, through the implementation of its competition policy, through infrastructure investment, and indeed through the employment of public service itself. The reality, listen first. The reality in our country, as in most other countries, this is now the stark reality, is that the private sector creates most of the jobs. Now, the private sector in our own country, the private sector creates 3/4 of South Africa's workers' jobs and accounts for over 2/3 of investment and research and development expenditure. In South Africa, the number of people employed in the public sector increased from 1.9 million in 2002 to 2.8 million in 2017. That's quite a sizable increase. Over the same period, the number, now this is facing the reality of our situation. Over the same period, the number of people employed in the private sector increased from 8.2 million to 13.5 million. Now, South Africa is not alone in seeking to rapidly expand our productive capacity by unleashing the potential of the private sector. What we're seeking to do is to do what we have often said. We want to crowd in the private sector so that they can let go of these monies that they hold so that they can create jobs. And we want to continue creating that conducive environment so that they do create the jobs. One just needs to look, for example, at the approach taken by China under Deng Xiaoping. Now, I read quite a lot of the things that Deng Xiaoping did. His experience was to mobilize when he began to change China and modernize it. Deng Xiaoping embarked on a process of mobilizing capital, private capital at that, to promote private enterprise to meet the country's developmental needs. As noted by Professor Chirizi Marwara in his article just yesterday, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, he published an article where he said, in 2018, 87% of urban employment in China was from the private sector, compared to 18% in 1995. At the same time, the total GDP increased from $734 billion in 1995 to to $13 trillion in 2018. We therefore do not accept that we must make a choice between a developmental state that drives economic and social transformation and a vibrant, expanding private sector that fuels growth and employment. We do not agree that by recognizing the role of business in creating employment, that we diminish the central role of the state in coordinating, planning, and guiding the development of the economy. Now, it is evident from the program that I outlined in SONA, we envisage both a developmental state and a dynamic and agile private sector which work together and complement each other. And this is precisely the policy approach of the African National Congress for a mixed economy. This is what we mean. This is what we mean when we talk about a mixed economy that draws on the resources, but that also draws on the strengths and the capabilities of both public and private sectors. Now, if you have both working together, they may continue to be sworn enemies, but if you have both working together to a agreed goal, then you're then able to grow your economy. This is precisely how other countries like China, which was quoted ad nauseum by Honorable Shibambu, was able to grow and to be the gigantic power that it is today, to a point where ICBC, the biggest bank in the world, is now listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And it is still, yes, owned by government, but they brought in the private sector and floated their shares on the New York Stock Exchange so that ICBC can grow. And the same applies to China Mobile, or Mobile, the largest mobile telephone company in the world. They followed exactly the same trajectory. Deng Xiaoping said it does not matter whether a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. And that is what we should start looking at. Leaving no one behind means expanding opportunities for young people in our country, expanding opportunities for women, but also for people living with disabilities, so that they can participate more meaningfully in the economy. We are focusing on the economic empowerment of the women of our country. Now, had we not been stopped, or diverted rather, by COVID-19 when we were chair of the AU, we would have wanted to see this women empowerment program being expanded throughout the continent, not that it is not being done. Not only is this an important part of the fight against gender-based violence, it is also a fundamental matter of social justice and essential if our economy is to draw on the potential of all our people. We are determined to make greater progress on the decision to set aside at least 40% of government procurement for women-owned and run businesses. This is what we want to see happening. This year we will ratify the African Union Protocol on the rights of persons with disabilities, which amongst other things includes the right to work. It places a responsibility on government to promote opportunities for people with disabilities to initiate self-employment, entrepreneurship, and so that they are able to have access to financial services as well. The Employment Equity Amendment Bill has been tabled in Parliament to regulate the setting of sector-specific targets for representation of Black people, women, and persons with disabilities. Leaving no one behind, means supporting those who are unemployed. One of the most important successes of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan is the presidential employment stimulus, as well as the number of reforms, structural reforms that we have embarked upon. As I reported in SONA, this initiative has provided work and livelihoods opportunities for over 850,000 people in the 16 months since its establishment. This program is making a real difference in the lives of many in our society whose potential would otherwise be lost to unemployment. It includes the more than 100,000 small-scale farmers who have received vouchers to expand their production. Honorable Singh spoke about this yesterday when he said that the halt that had been put to this program should now be restarted so that it can continue contributing positively, because he is one of those who has seen the impact that it is having, particularly in the rural areas in the various provinces. We have announced that we are massively increasing the scale of this program to reach 250,000 small-scale farmers and transform our rural landscape. Now, if the fiscal challenges that we face were not an impediment, I would have wanted to see 1 million of the small-scale farmers being made to participate in this program. And as small-scale farmers participate, we find that it is quite empowering to them. The late Professor Karan from Stellenbosch had said that agriculture has the potential to create 1 million jobs. And I do believe that we can unleash that potential and create up to and even more than 1 million jobs for food security and a number of other purposes. This whole program, the presidential stimulus program, includes the artists, the musicians, and film producers. And Minister Mtetwa will talk about that when he presents his budget votes. Now, these are the people who have received grant funding to continue their work, and the museums and cultural institutions that have been saved from closure. It includes the many thousands of people who have been employed to build and maintain rural roads. Honorable Shibambu says that we're talking about pavements. I want to take you around the many areas, not only where I went in Limpopo, the many areas in our country where rural roads are being paved. And we now want to move to the industrialization aspect, where the bricks are made right in the villages where our people live, so that they can pave their own areas. Now, if you fly around the country and see the mud roads in our country, you will have belief that as we pave our roads, we are not paving pavements. We are paving roads which enable our people to walk and to drive on. Now, this is an enabling process, and it enables our people to take their products, to take their services to markets. And it also includes young people whom we are helping to access opportunities through the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention. We have implemented these programs and continue to do so. Now, what gives me pride about these programs is that they were done within a short space of time, right across the country, and as they were being done, there were no middle people, men and women. There was no corruption in the implementation of these programs, and they have impacted on the lives of those that were targeted for these programs. And much as we face severe fiscal constraints because of the challenges that we have, these programs are making an impact, and they are also yielding economic value for those who participate in them. If we had more resources available, we would scale up all these initiatives, and we would be able to reach more unemployed people. Now, of course, what we would prefer to see is to see less and less employed people, but more and more people productively involved and participating in economic activity in our country, either through programs in the public sector or programs in the private sector. Through these and other measures, we are supporting the dreams of millions of young people, and even in the most difficult of conditions, finding opportunities for them to succeed and to be economically active. It is worth noting that this program is being coordinated from the presidency, bringing together 14 government departments to implement the largest and fastest expansion of public employment in our country's history, where we've gotten rid of silo work mentality, where departments work together, being properly and effectively being coordinated, yes, at the center of government, which happens to be the presidency. Now, this is not the work of a bloated presidency. No, it isn't the work of a bloated presidency. And it is not a parallel state that some people say is being set up. It is a presidency that is at work to drive a coherent and effective program of action across government. Now, this is a government elected by the people, for the people, and which carries the trust of the people of our country. This is a government that remains united around a common goal and program of action that will not be deflected or diverted from its course because of statements like it is a bloated presidency. I preside over a cabinet of ministers that are committed to their responsibilities, ministers in whom I have the greatest confidence as president. And more importantly, I'll wait until you want to listen. And more importantly, in whom the people of our country also have confidence and the highest expectations. Now, honorable members, leaving no one behind. Leaving no one behind means, and in this time round, we mean it when we say leaving no one behind. It means expanding. It means expanding social protection to reach those who are in need. While we have focused in this sauna on growth and employment, millions of South Africans face the immediate challenge of feeding themselves and their families. It is estimated that food poverty affects some 5.5 million households. Without monthly grants for children, the elderly, and persons with disabilities, many South Africans would face destitution. We know that grants have provided an effective system for income redistribution and poverty alleviation in a society with unacceptable levels of inequality and unemployment. Given the scale of unemployment and the impact of the pandemic, the interventions we are undertaking to create jobs will take many years to reach the 11 million South Africans who are unemployed. We are, as we said, extending the 350 Rand Social Relief of Distress Grant for another year, precisely to reach those people who are unemployed and to stave off hunger. We are doing this within a fiscal environment that has been badly worsened by the pandemic. And we do need to do so while making sure that we do not further weaken our macroeconomic position and that we do not allow our debt service costs to further crowd out social spending. The Minister of Finance will elaborate on this when he presents his budget next week. And he will paint the full picture of what servicing our debt does to our budget and what we need to do. He will outline all that so that we all gain a better appreciation. Some would suggest that it doesn't matter, borrow more money. And some would even say it doesn't matter even if our debt servicing costs keep burgeoning and going up. Now we seek to be prudent, and the Minister of Finance will be presenting all this next week when he presents his budget. As a country, we nevertheless need to fill the gap in social protection to achieve a minimum level of support for those who cannot find work. Finding a sustainable, affordable, and effective solution must be one of the central pillars of the renewed social compact that we have undertaken to build. It is this that the social partners are going to have to deal with. What do we do with the 11 million people who currently are out of work, and look at the extent to which we can create jobs that will absorb those people? There are several other aspects of social protection that are receiving attention. This includes strengthening our child protection services in areas such as adoption, foster care, and the protection of the rights of children. We have programs, for example, where that Resiha program is a community-based program to protect orphans, vulnerable children, including those living in child-headed households and those living and working on the streets. This is all part of our efforts to develop a comprehensive social protection system that in the end leaves no one behind. Leaving no one behind means improving the quality of our education system as well. To achieve the transformation of our economy in the long run, we must improve our education outcomes. It starts with early childhood development. The Presidential Employment Stimulus has provided support to close on to 60,000 early childhood development practitioners that were affected by the pandemic. With a transfer of responsibility for ECD into the Department of Basic Education, we are now better able to manage the transition from early childhood development into preschool and into schooling. There is significant work underway to strengthen basic education through addressing the school infrastructure backlog, which Minister Motshekga will also speak about in her budget vote. We are also focusing on the training and equipping of teachers to promote early grade reading and bringing new teachers into the system through the Funza Rushaka program. The appointment of over 500,000 young people as education assistants in over 22,000 schools around the country has been welcomed by teachers, by school management, parents, as a valuable contribution to the quality of learning and teaching. And this we've been able to do just within the past year. We will be continuing this program into the next phase of the presidential employment stimulus. The expansion of access to higher education is a great achievement that will benefit the economy and our country for many years to come. Together with the work being done to strengthen basic education, the growth of post-school education will ignite the skills revolution that we have so often spoken about. And Minister Nzimande will also speak about that more when he presents his budget vote. Importantly, this skills revolution will have the greatest impact on children from poor and working class families, helping to break the cycle of poverty. To ensure that skills training is linked directly to the demand in the economy, we are pioneering a fundamentally different approach to skills development for unemployed youth. This approach links the payment for training beyond the placement of candidates in a job opportunity. The first phase will provide training to up to 4,500 unemployed youth to secure employment in the digital and tech sector and funding for the National Skills Fund, the CETAs and the UIF, with funding from those entities, Skills Fund, CETAs and UIF Labor Activation Program. Now, by addressing the educational needs of children and young people at every point in their life development, and by helping them to transition from learning to earning, we are working to ensure that we leave no young person behind, because we are committed that no one must be left behind. Now, across the world, the pandemic has severely damaged economies, undermined livelihoods, and set back human development by many, many years. The experience of the last 2 years underscores the need to ensure that all South Africans have access to quality health care regardless of their ability to pay. Now, the massive inequality in access to quality health care is one of the greatest constraints on social and economic progress. COVID-19 has required the diversion of significant health resources. As a result, we have not paid sufficient attention to other public health crises affecting our people. We are still in the midst of an AIDS pandemic. Our country has the largest number of people living with HIV in the world. We are far behind other countries in achieving our testing and treatment targets. We must and we will accelerate the implementation of this program to save lives. Just as we drew on the experience on our HIV program to respond to COVID-19, we can now draw on our experience of managing COVID-19 to strengthen our HIV response. And in the same way that South Africans have had to adopt safe hygiene practices to prevent COVID infection, we must encourage similar discipline in pursuing healthy lifestyles to minimize the prevalence of diseases such as diabetes and hypertension as well. in advancing the health and well-being of South Africans, we must do everything we can to ensure, once again, that no one is left behind. Every person in this country has a right to be safe and to feel safe. The murder and rape of women by men, the children killed in the crossfire of gang wars, the theft of cables and other infrastructure, the intimidation and extortion at construction sites are a daily reminder of our far removed goal to achieve a better life for our people. Yet despite the scale of the challenge, we are taking real and practical measures across a range of fronts, yes, to respond to crime, violence, and instability. Working with partners in civil society and other communities across the country, we are confronting gender-based violence and femicide. We are confronting the attitudes and practices that demean and disempower the women of our country. We're strengthening the legal protections that women and children have. We are improving support to victims, and we're working to ensure that perpetrators, in the end, do see justice. Now, due to the legislation that this government introduced and which this parliament passed, a woman can now apply for a protection order online and does not have to face her abuser. A child is now able to testify. A child is now able to testify via CCTV in one of the new sexual offenses courts. A victim can be confident that they will find an evidence kit at a police station. A suspect will find it harder to get bail. We are strengthening our police service, tackling corruption within its ranks, setting up specialized multidisciplinary teams to tackle specific types of crime against our people and our economy. Now, the report of the expert panel into the July unrest is indeed damning, but it also provides critical insights and makes important recommendations that we will use to strengthen our entire approach to security and stability in our country. By the same measure, we expect the report of the State Capture Commission will make far-reaching recommendations that will empower us to take those steps necessary to prevent and act against corruption. And in this regard, we would like all of us to work together. This Parliament, in unison, should be able to join hands with the executive so that we tackle corruption in a more effective way. Now, this is not a government that seeks to hide problems. We expose them and we work to fix them. Our principled commitment to equality and justice extends beyond our borders. Through all our international engagements, in our relations with other countries, and in our participation in international fora, we continue to work for a more just and equitable global order. We continue to advance the interests and needs of poorer countries, particularly on the African continent, and ensure that they are properly represented in all multilateral institutions. We continue to work with our neighbors to promote peace, stability, and development. That is why we are supporting SADC's efforts to deal with the insurgency in Mozambique, in the Cabo Delgado province, and ongoing assistance to Eswatini and Lesotho to resolve political challenges that they are facing. We cannot accept that there are still people in the 21st century that continue to languish under colonial occupation. Our support for the self-determination of the peoples of Palestine and Western Sahara remains a central pillar of our work towards a just and equal, peaceful world order. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated how important it is that no country, no community, and no person is left behind in the drive for vaccines, for treatment, and for care. Through the positions that we occupy in the African Union and on international bodies, we have consistently fought for developing economies to receive financial assistance to respond and recover from this pandemic. We will be carrying this message once again as the African Union when the AU meets tomorrow and day after tomorrow, where I am traveling to in Europe to actually carry this message across as the African Union. We have consistently fought for equity in access to vaccines, and through our efforts have secured over 500 million vaccine doses for the African continent. And we as South Africa have also donated vaccines to some of our African sister countries. Despite these achievements, there is much more that needs to be done to ensure that the global recovery is inclusive and also that it is equitable. At the G20, we have advocated for the redistribution of newly issued global reserves, known as the special drawing rights towards our continent. There is much more that needs to be done to ensure that wealthy countries honor their commitments to support the actions of developing economy countries to respond to the effects of climate change. There is much more that needs to be done to reform the United Nations and to democratize other global institutions. If, as a global community, we are committed to ensuring that no one is left behind, these are the urgent tasks that we need to undertake. Honorable members and fellow South Africans, this debate has unfolded at a time and in a place of great significance. It was from the balcony of this building that the father of our democracy and our nation, Nelson Mandela, addressed a jubilant crowd after his release from prison on the 11th of February 1990. The crowd which gathered on the Grand Parade could not have known the events that would follow, but they knew one thing, that we as a people would prevail. As we confront another turning point in our history, we must draw on the same spirit and courage and determination. 25 years ago this month, our democratic constitution came into effect. As we look to the year ahead, we are reminded of our solemn responsibility as the representative of the people of this country gathered here to heal the divisions of the past and to establish a society that is based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. We need to work together, despite our many differences, to improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. We must remember that it is possible to stifle a country with cynicism, and it is possible to inspire a country with hope. Going forward, our task is clear. We must build a new consensus to revive our economy and to renew the promise of our country. And we must leave no one behind. Let us be the merchants of hope. Let us be the merchants of confidence. Let us go out and spread hope and confidence amongst our people instead of cynicism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. At this point, I take the opportunity to thank the Honorable President for his address and response. That, honorable members, concludes the debate on the State of the Nation address and the business for the day. This joint sitting is now adjourned.
Record.